Welcome back. We've got a good one in store for you tonight. My name is Gino D'Angelo. I will be your host for the next hour or so. I asked ChatGPT a few questions to see what it knew about Northern Michigan, and I was so surprised by the answers that I thought it would be a great live to maybe entertain you a little bit going into the 4th of July week. So as always, I appreciate you joining me live every Thursday at 7 p.m. Drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from, whether you watch it live. I know a lot of you are here live, but then a lot of you come back and watch the replay because of time constraints or you're not available during the time that we're live. So whether it's live or watch the replay, drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. I love to find out where our viewers are tuning in from. As always, these are meant to be very interactive. I've got a great topic tonight. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with it. But if there's something you'd like to know about or something you'd like to talk about or something you've heard on the news, the real estate market is, taking a lot of the headlines right now just because of how quickly things have changed. And, there's a lot of rumors that we're switching into a buyer's market. So again, these are meant to be interactive. Drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. Drop a comment. Let me know if you have any questions. And make sure you stick around to the end tonight, because I also, not only did I ask ChatGPT a bunch of questions about Northern Michigan just to find out what it knew, I also had it create images for what it thinks the average person in a lot of towns in Northern Michigan look like. So if you stick around till the end, that's going to be a fun one, because they were spot on in a lot of cases, but also I think they're a little bit off in some other cases. So again, thank you for joining me. I asked ChatGPT 20 questions. I said 20 smart questions about living and buying in Northern Michigan. And this is what ChatGPT gave me for answers. So let's hop into it. I'm going to post the questions on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to read what the responses were. So this should be a lot of fun. Let me know if anything surprises you, anything you disagree with, agree with. Again, whether you're watching this live or the replay, drop a comment. Let me know what you think of ChatGPT. And let me know, are you using ChatGPT? Is it part, I saw for the first time in however many years that Google search was actually down. And they say it's because so many people, whether it's ChatGPT or Grok or one of the others, are using AI to answer questions versus Google. And I think, we're using AI a lot in our business to, learn more quickly, meaning one thing that's great about AI is it gives you a lot of information very quickly. That means you can learn a lot more, you get a lot more data, analyze a lot quicker, more quickly, I should say. So without further ado, we're going to get to it. The first question I asked was, what economic trends are currently shaping the housing market in Northern Michigan? In fact, before I get into this question is actually what made me decide to do this live, because I asked this question just out of curiosity to see what it would say. And the answer it gave me made me ask more questions. And I thought, well, this will be a cool live, because usually I come out here and I try to educate you as much as possible. But tonight, I think I'm going to take a different approach and educate you and also entertain you at the same point, because this is at the same time, because this is meant to be fun, again, interactive. And I'm genuinely curious what you, the viewer, think of the responses from ChatGPT. So the first question I asked was, what economic trends are currently shaping the housing market in Northern Michigan? And this is what ChatGPT said. Northern Michigan is experiencing continued demand driven by remote workers, retirees, and second home buyers, especially in waterfront towns, which, let's face it, most towns in Northern Michigan are waterfront towns. Inventory remains low, keeping prices high. Rising interest costs, construction expenses are slowing some entry-level movement, but luxury and vacation home markets remain active. And that is, I was actually surprised how spot on that was. It did say rising insurance costs, which I think they're wrong. I don't think insurance costs are rising in Northern Michigan, but the rest is true. It is definitely slowing the entry level, but the luxury and vacation home market remain active, meaning, we're still seeing a lot of very high sales here, but the entry level homes are struggling a little bit. And that's exactly what I'm seeing in my day-to-day business. How does seasonal tourism impact real estate prices and availability in towns like Petoskey, Traverse City, or Charlevoix? ChatGPT said, seasonal tourism inflates demand in spring through fall, creating competition for homes and vacation rentals. This drives up prices and makes inventory scarce. Many properties are purchased for short-term rental income, reducing the availability of year-round housing for locals. And I thought this was interesting, because this is true, but like 3 years ago. So I think ChatGPT was a little bit behind the times on this one. So Drop a comment below. Let me know. Do you agree with me? Is ChatGPT a little bit slow on this one? I think would have been the answer a little bit closer to the pandemic and the COVID years. But as of right now, um, I think the seasonal tourism impacts the real estate market the way it always has, meaning more people coming to Northern Michigan. And I can't tell you how many times, somebody's come to their friend's house on Burt Lake and decided that they want a house on Burt Lake. And that's sort of their entry level into the real estate market is simply staying at a friend's house or staying at a rental and deciding that they'd want a more permanent spot here in Northern Michigan. This is another good one. What are long-term investment prospects of buying lakefront property on inland lakes versus Lake Michigan? ChatGPT said Lake Michigan properties tend to hold and grow in value due to their prestige and scarcity. Inland lakes such as Burt, Walloon, Torch also appreciate well, but offer more variety in pricing. Inland lakefront can provide stronger short-term rental returns, while Lake Michigan is more of a legacy or a long-term investment. And I thought that was a really interesting response and fairly accurate. I had a client call me 2 days ago that is looking for a house on Lake Michigan in Harbor Springs with a dock, and they had a $2 to $2.5 million budget. And when I told them that property is more likely for $5 million, which sounds like a lot because it is, they were sort of surprised. There are some, Lake Michigan is that's a very long shoreline, but there are areas in Harbor Springs, Bay Harbor, Petoskey, Charlevoix, all the way down the coast of Traverse City, that there are some significant homes there. And there's significant homes also on Burt, Walloon, Torch, or all in the lakes. And I think this is another example of maybe ChatGPT. I think and I'll get to this later, but my overwhelming thought process about this conversation with ChatGPT about what is going on in Northern Michigan is I think the information that artificial intelligence as of today is pulling is still a little bit outdated because, again, a couple of years ago, I would have agreed with this, but I think there are some properties on Burt, Walloon, Torch, Elk Lake, Mullet Lake that also are legacy or long-term assets. And a lot of those houses are big. They're going to be handed down from family to family and, sort of become generational homes. And I think we're seeing that across waterfront in Northern Michigan. How do short-term rental regulations vary between Northern Michigan municipalities, and how should buyers evaluate them before purchasing? Now, this is something we talk about on the channel. Again, so I was curious what ChatGPT would say about this. Regulations vary significantly by town, which is true. For example, Petoskey and Harbor Springs are stricter with permitting, while Indian River or Boyne Falls may be more lenient. Buyers should consult, and this is spot on, buyers should consult township or city zoning ordinances and talk to a local real estate agent and township clerk before assuming rental income potential. That's great advice. We've talked about that before here about short-term rentals. I think I mentioned a couple of lives ago, maybe a month ago or so, that I actually went to a short-term rental management convention in Traverse City, and I learned something that sort of surprised me. What I learned was I thought for a long time that if you had a township that did not have zoning ordinances in place for short-term rentals, that was actually a positive because that meant you could do them. And on the surface, that's probably true. But what they told me at this event was that's actually scary because all it takes is one election cycle or somebody to get on a board or get a position of power and decide that they do not want short-term rentals, and they can enact law that can suddenly change your ability to short-term rent a home. So it's actually a lot safer to go someplace that either has a license or what the regulations are all going to be ahead of time. That way you know what you're getting into. Jess says, number 2, ChatGPT is 100% right. Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thanks for weighing in, Jess. My friend Jim Wojcik, I'm listening. I'm happy that you're here, Jim. I appreciate you being on the lives. What are the pros and cons of owning a second home in Northern Michigan if you live downstate? Pros: seasonal escape, which is why you come to Northern Michigan. Long-term investment potential. These are the pros: seasonal escape, long-term investment, possible rental income, lower property taxes than metro areas. Cons: maintenance coordination, winterization needs, potential weather damage, and travel time to address issues. I think, again, this is pretty accurate. It definitely is a seasonal escape. I believe a home in Northern Michigan, if you buy it right, is a great long-term investment. Definitely some possible rental income, lower property taxes. Yes, property taxes are lower in northern Michigan than in some other areas. You definitely have to coordinate maintenance. We can certainly help you with that. And there's sort of a cottage industry in northern Michigan about people that take care of cottages and seasonal homes here. So we can certainly connect you with one of those. Obviously, you have to winterize it. That's a big thing. Are you going to winterize it, clean out the pipes, shut it down for the year? Are you going to keep the heat on a minimal temperature? That's one of the big things you have to consider with a seasonal home. Possible weather damage. We just had the ice storm a couple months ago. It seems like in northern Michigan, there's always going to be some kind of weather in the off season that you're going to have to consider if you have a second home in northern Michigan. And then obviously travel concerns. If you live in Texas and you need to get back here quickly to see your house because something happened, you're going to have to book a flight, and that is definitely going to be an inconvenience. This is another good one. Which areas offer the best combination of remote work, infrastructure, and northern Michigan lifestyle? Traverse City, Petoskey, and Boyne City offer solid broadband access, co-working spaces, and lifestyle amenities. Smaller towns like Elk Rapids and Charlevoix are catching up. Always verify broadband speeds at a specific property address. This one is spot on. Traverse City, Petoskey. Surprised Boyne City made the list because I don't know that Boyne City is any more conducive for remote work than some of the other areas, but certainly Traverse City and Petoskey. I do agree. I think this is really wise that that ChatGPT recognized that smaller towns like Elk Rapids and Charlevoix are up and coming, because I say that all the time. Maybe that's where they got it from. Maybe ChatGPT pulled one of our videos and that's where they're getting their information from. This is great advice. Always verify, it says broadband speeds, but always verify internet speeds wherever you're going to buy a house, specifically if you're doing things like working remotely with a bunch of Zoom meetings. I know a lot of people who've moved here that homeschool their kids that need super high or super fast internet to connect to their kids' schooling. So make sure, and there's tons of tests. That's usually part of the showing process or the home inspection process is testing the speeds. When we're doing virtual tours for people, oftentimes they want to know what the speed is at the house. And in most areas in northern Michigan, there's a couple one-offs here and there. Most areas have gotten high quality internet, so that should not be an issue. How should buyers assess well and septic systems when purchasing a rural or waterfront home? This is a question I get asked a lot simply because a lot of people, I grew up in northern Michigan. My dad owned a construction company that actually installed septic systems. So I am more than familiar with how septic systems work. But that is something that is sort of a area of concern or question for people relocating to northern Michigan that I've never dealt with them before. Because if you grow up in a metropolitan area or a city, you're used to just having a city well and septic, and you don't have to worry about any of that. So I'm here to tell you it is not as scary as it sounds, but let's see what ChatGPT said. Insist on a well and septic inspection by a licensed contractor. Check for proper drain field distance from water sources, water quality testing, especially for bacteria, nitrates, arsenic, and system age. Repair or replacement costs can be significant. I think that's great advice. If you're going to buy a house that has a well or septic, certainly want to make sure you get those two systems inspected. They're very easy to do. They're not terribly expensive. They're actually fairly simple systems. There's only a couple of things that are going to go wrong by and large with a septic field. There's only a couple of things that are going to go wrong with a well. So those are definitely easy things for you to figure out. But again, if you're interested in buying a home in northern Michigan and you're looking outside of town, you're likely going to have a well or a septic in. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any questions, because I've dealt with those my entire life. And again, they're not as scary as they sound. The response from ChatGPT did say, look for bacteria, nitrates, and arsenic. It's mostly bacteria. The times where I've seen, water tests come back negative is because there's bacteria in the well, and then you just chlorinate it and it goes away and life goes on. So as long as I can remember, I can't remember nitrates or arsenic being a problem in northern Michigan. What this is a good one. What climate-related risks should a buyer consider in northern Michigan? Flooding and shoreline erosion. This is what ChatGPT said. Flooding and shoreline erosion, especially in Great Lakes, heavy snowfall, ice damming, potential for power outages, and road accessibility during winter storms. Lake levels fluctuate and can affect bluff stability and beach access. Now, in this area, I know some areas on the southwest side of the state have had a little more of an issue with this. We have not had a problem yet. I don't see any areas where I think this is going to be a problem with flooding or erosion. Maybe later in life that'll be an issue, but as of today, I don't know a single area in northern Michigan that has this concern. So I think ChatGPT is getting a little bit carried away, but they get that information from somewhere, and I think that's more towards the southern part of Michigan than the northern part. This is a question that comes up often. How accessible is healthcare, especially for retirees considering relocating to smaller towns? That is one of the first concerns I get from people who are retiring in northern Michigan is they're leaving, Chicago or Metro Detroit or Grand Rapids where they have tons of healthcare options and they're moving to a little area like northern Michigan that doesn't have the same healthcare options. So this is what ChatGPT said. Larger towns like Petoskey with McLaren, northern Michigan, Traverse City with Munson Healthcare, and Gaylord have well-rated hospitals. Smaller towns may only have urgent care, so access to specialty care may require a 36-minute drive. That's the best way to answer that question. ChatGPT got that one 100% right. That is why towns like Petoskey, Traverse City, Gaylord, even Charlevoix's got a little hospital, but Sheboygan has a hospital. Those areas are attracting people that are retiring in northern Michigan because they want accessibility to healthcare. If you don't have an immediate need or you don't go to the doctor a lot, the idea of being 20, 30 minutes away is not the end of the world. And there are plenty of people that retired to northern Michigan that don't live near the hospital, and everything works out well for them. So if you aren't afraid of a little bit of a drive, if you need to go to the hospital or see a doctor, then, that shouldn't be an issue. What are the implications of buying a home in an unincorporated township versus the city limits in Michigan? Unincorporated townships may have lower taxes, which they do, looser zoning, which they do, and fewer municipal services. City limits often include water, sewer, stricter codes, and access to amenities. It is important to understand the trade-off between freedom and service. That is 100% the truth. Unincorporated townships are just townships that are not incorporated into a city. They typically have lower taxes and less rules than being within the city limits of a specific area. So that is definitely something to consider. You also don't get as many services. There are a couple fringe areas where you'll see a house or an area that's outside of the city limits that still gets city services, but doesn't pay city taxes. There's a couple places in Petoskey like that. And that is sort of a win-win. And that's honestly affects the value of those houses. And sometimes that's why those houses get a little bit more money than they may have otherwise. How does living in Harbor Springs, this is a question I got from a buyer this week. How does living in Harbor Springs year round compare to seasonal residency in Leland or Glen Arbor? These people lived in Glen Arbor and were trying to relocate to Harbor Springs full time, and they just were not familiar with how that would go. ChatGPT said Harbor Springs has more year-round infrastructure, schools, restaurants, activities than Leland and Glen Arbor tend to shut down more in the off-season and more isolated. Winter accessibility and services are better in Harbor Springs. Also, there's a ton of skiing in Harbor Springs, so if you like to ski, winter is going to be your jam, and that is definitely something to consider. Love the topic. It's best to get a human expert backing up, debunking what AI has to say. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, I thought this would be a fun one. Obviously, this is, if it were as easy as going on ChatGPT to find out about buying or selling real estate in northern Michigan, I would not exist. But I'm glad I still do for now. Maybe one day AI will get smart enough to replace what I do. But yeah, I thought this is more for entertainment than education. I want to make sure I make that disclaimer. As I went through these answers before I got on tonight, some of these are close, some of these are not close, but I thought it would just be a fun way to head into the 4th of July weekend, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. What are the trade-offs between privacy and convenience when choosing between a home on acreage versus a downtown condo in Petoskey? Acreage provides space, views, and quiet, but usually requires driving for everything and more upkeep. A downtown condo offers walkability, low maintenance, and access to restaurants and shops, but less privacy and noise. Well, that's really interesting. We get the question a lot about, we get a lot of people that come to northern Michigan or come to Petoskey and they want to buy a condo. And often during that journey, they realize they really want a house. They just love the low maintenance of a condo. And something I tell them, and I've had people take this advice from me and do it and have success with it, is with the cottage care companies here and the caretakers and, the lawn guy and whatever you need, you can really, at the end of the day, when you're buying a condo, you're paying an HOA fee or whatever else for a lot of the services. You can sort of do that on your own. And I've had people do that. And here's what I mean. is you can buy a house downtown and hire everybody to take care of everything, which is very similar to owning a condo. Now, in a condo, you don't own the roof, you don't own the foundation, you don't own that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit different. But I've had people say, holy smokes, I can make my house a condo just by spending a few $100s a month by having people take care of all the things that I need to take care of. So definitely food for thought if you're torn between buying a condo or a house. Maybe you like the idea again of the low maintenance, but you'd really like a house, or you'd really like to have more, you know, options when it comes to location. You can certainly buy a house, hire a lot of the stuff done. Got great companies around here that do that sort of thing and take great care of the area residents. This is a fun one again. Which Northern Michigan towns are most likely to appreciate in value over the next 5 to 10 years, and why? We've got a video that's coming up this Sunday, so make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that way you don't miss it. But the video this Sunday is talking about predictions for the next 10 years in Northern Michigan, and I think it's going to have a lot of great information. Which Northern Michigan towns are most likely to appreciate in value over the next 5 to 10 years, and why? Boyne City, Elk Rapids, and parts of Sheboygan County are poised for growth due to increased attention from remote workers and second home buyers. Petoskey and Traverse City will remain solid investments due to strong amenities and limited supply. I think this was a really intelligent answer by ChatGPT. I agree that places like Boyne City, Elk Rapids, and parts of Sheboygan County, I was actually surprised it recognized that because I thought I was the only person in the world that knew that. There are parts of Sheboygan County right now that are still undervalued. And I think as we see, more infrastructure development and more people come to Northern Michigan, that you're going to see a lot of growth in those areas. I keep talking about, maybe this is why it keeps coming up on these questions, but I keep talking about Elk Rapids. I think that's a great little town, striking distance to Traverse City, tons of water, up and coming downtown, good schools, easy accessibility to 31. From Elk Rapids, you can get anywhere. And again, parts of Sheboygan County, Indian River, Sheboygan, Afton, Wolverine, even as far as Onaway, that starts getting into a different county. But those areas are beautiful. I'm starting to see people build houses out there in areas I never thought I'd see people build houses. So I think it's just sheerly people are recognizing there's a lot of bang for your buck out there, and they're certainly considering those places. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you're watching this and you've been watching me for a while, or you're dialed into what's going on in Northern Michigan, is there a town that you think is poised to see exponential growth in the next 5 to 10 years that I did not mention? I'm sure there's one out there that somebody's going to mention. Drop a town and we'll talk about it. How do school quality and local education options compare across Northern Michigan communities? This is a great, we could have a whole, I feel like we could have a whole video just on this topic. Petoskey, this is what ChatGPT said. Petoskey and Harbor Springs have highly ranked public schools. Traverse City offers a wide range of public, charter, and private schools. Smaller districts may have fewer extracurricular or advanced placement options, but more individualized attention. That's ChatGPT. What I believe ChatGPT is trying to say is the smaller schools have smaller class sizes because there's less people in them. So you're going to get more one-on-one individualized attention, which I think is great and probably true. Petoskey and Harbor Springs definitely have highly ranked public schools. But if you go to niche.com, that's a website I always direct people to when they start talking about schools. You'll see when you go to niche.com, so don't take my word for it, most schools in Northern Michigan are highly rated. Now, there's some pockets that don't have the most highly rated schools, but by and large, and feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk about schools if you're thinking about relocating to Northern Michigan. But most school districts in Northern Michigan have high quality schools. So make sure you check out niche.com, niche.com. It's the best school rating website I've seen. I've tried them all, and that is typically where we direct our clients. What are the key differences in lifestyle and property maintenance between lakefront, riverfront, and inland properties? We'll make sure I'm getting this right. Up north, lakefront, expensive, more regulated, stunning views, high maintenance. Riverfront means peaceful, great for kayaking, sometimes seasonal flooding. Inland lakes, affordable, flexible, easier maintenance, but fewer water perks. So that is the difference between lifestyle and property management between lakefront, riverfront, and inland properties. What does up north living really mean to locals? I love this one. I think I've said that like every other one. So these are really great questions. And I think this is a lot of fun. What does up north living really mean to locals, and how can newcomers integrate respectfully into small town communities? Up north means nature, simplicity, self-reliance, and tight-knit community. Newcomers can integrate by shopping local, volunteering, respecting traditions like hunting season, and being patient with a slower pace. I think that's a good question. I remember reading back through this. I think that's a really interesting response. I don't agree with ChatGPT on this, but I don't think it's that hard. I think up north living to locals means something a little bit different to everyone. My version of living up north is probably different than your version of living up north. I love my lifestyle here. I love the things I do in all four seasons. I love my day-to-day life, but there are people here that live completely different than I do. And as far as newcomers coming into Northern Michigan, ChatGPT makes this sound like you're joining a cult, and that's not the truth. Yeah, I mean, you can respect the traditional like hunting season. People hunt here. I don't hunt. A lot of people do hunt. I don't know what they mean, but I don't know what ChatGPT means by respecting traditions. That's just sort of something that happens here. So I disagree a little bit on that one. How does owning a home near a ski resort like Boyne Mountain affect winter maintenance costs and rental demand? The pro is high winter rental income, absolutely, especially for larger homes. The con is significant snow removal costs, higher utility bills, and road wear. HOA or municipal services may help, but eliminate responsibility. The only real winter maintenance costs you're going to have by owning a house near a ski resort like Boyne Mountain or the Highlands is you're just going to have to remove the snow, make sure your roof's in good condition, and make sure your house is well insulated. That way your utility bills don't go sky high. What is also nice is that is going to give you year-round rental demand because people come to those resorts all four seasons. They golf in the summer, they ski in the winter, and I know a lot of people that own rental houses near those resorts that get a very high rental income. In fact, I know people that use them in the summer, enjoy being in Northern Michigan, rent them out in the winter, and that is a really good way to own a house near those locations. What local resources exist to help buyers navigate land use restrictions, zoning, and conservation easements in Northern Michigan? Now, we don't have a lot of conservation easements, but it says, the ChatGPT said, township zoning departments like county register of deeds, local title companies, and land conservancy groups like the Little Traverse Conservancy, great organization, are key resources. Also ask your real estate agent to connect you with local planners and inspectors. So I would say I'm the best local resource on this kind of stuff because depending on the specific area, I can certainly tell you what you're able to do, what you're not able to do. You know, a lot of times there's township ordinances, there's HOA restrictions, there's deed restrictions. They're out there, but we don't have a lot of conservation easements in Northern Michigan. Now there are specific properties that do, and what a conservation easement is when somebody owned the property, they put a conservation easement in place, meaning they can sell the land, but there's a protected portion of the land that is they're trying to conserve that you can't build on, and that it's a one-off thing. It's typically that devalues the property a little bit because it's tough to buy a piece of property that you can't use the entire property in the way you want to use. What are the most overlooked costs of owning a second home in Northern Michigan? Insurance, especially for waterfront, snow plowing, septic pumping, road maintenance for private drives, the HOA fees, and the cost of winterizing or dewinterizing annually. ChatGPT's got this mostly right. We don't have a lot of HOAs here. By and large, it's such a small percentage of homes here have to adhere to any HOA standards or regulations that I know in a lot of areas that's a big deal. It's just not something we have to deal with as much up here in Northern Michigan. Last but not least, make sure you stick around for the end because once I go over this, we're going to go over what ChatGPT thinks the average person in each town looks like. And I thought this was a lot of fun just going through them. And we didn't do anything. We asked ChatGPT what we thought they would look like. They gave us an image. We saved it into a file, and we're going to show it to you here in a couple of minutes. How can a buyer evaluate whether a home will be livable year-round, especially if it was built as a summer cottage? Check for insulation, heating system, forced air baseboard, foundation type, well and septic capacity, and road plowing in the winter. If it has no basements and minimal insulation, it may not be suited for winter without upgrades. That's a question I often get asked with, especially with so many people relocating to Northern Michigan full time and wanting to be on the water. A lot of those homes were built for seasonal use. Reach out to a home inspector, ask the owners if they've ever used it year round, check the insulation. That's actually a lot easier to figure out than it may sound. So again, ask your real estate agent. Hopefully it's me. If it's not, it's one of the other great real estate agents in Northern Michigan. They can tell you exactly what is going on. I actually have one story about this. This is probably 10 years ago, I sold a house on Crooked Lake, and the owner said they had used it year round, but one of the walls did not have the proper insulation and the pipes froze. So lesson learned, make sure you check out all 4 walls to make sure there's enough insulation for you to be there year round, because 3 of the walls, or the 2 walls they checked, were fine, but one of them did not have enough insulation and their pipes actually froze. So make sure you thoroughly check. And now that I've been through that process one time, I probably overcheck to make sure that a house is able to be used year round if it hasn't been used in the past. So again, which one of these surprised you the most, whether you're watching live or the replay? If you're going through these, if you think ChatGPT got these spot on, let me know. Or if you think ChatGPT has no idea what they're talking about on a couple of these, then also let me know. So we're going to go through, I saved the best for last. We're going to go through what ChatGPT thinks the average person in each of these towns looks like. Drop a comment. Again, whether you're watching live or the replay, drop a comment. Let me know if you think it's close or not close. I almost turned this into a game where I was going to make you guess which town ChatGPT thought each one of these were, but I thought I'd save you the aggravation and just do it this way. So the first one is Petoskey. What do you think? North Face vest, got a little Henley shirt on. Looks like they're standing downtown. I don't know. That's not exactly Petoskey, but that is a very, there's actually a street in Petoskey that looks just like that, where the view at the end of the road is the water. So this is what ChatGPT thinks someone who lives in Petoskey looks like. Let me know, yay or nay, do you agree? Number 2 is Bay Harbor. Now this looks just like Bay Harbor. This looks like Vista Drive behind. I don't see, when I'm in Bay Harbor, I don't see people dressed like this very often. Although in a lot of people's minds, my guess is this is what they think people in Bay Harbor dress like. So again, let me know, do you think, in your mind, when you think of Bay Harbor, do you think this is what somebody who lives in Bay Harbor would look like? Charlevoix. This is another one. Actually, when I pulled this up, this one made me almost go back and correct it, because I think this looks more like Harbor Springs than Charlevoix. But I don't know. They got the jean jacket, they got the cool shirt, the necklace. Again, let me know what you think. They've got what I think is what they did get right about Charlevoix on this one is the people crossing the main street while other people are trying to drive through, because that seems to be when you drive through downtown Charlevoix, there's people either crossing the street in mixed of, just trying to get through town. Actually, this one should have had a drawbridge this one should have had a drawbridge in the background. That would have made this more Charlevoix. Traverse City, it looks like it's got, I don't know what kind of vest that is. Some kind of cool vest. This one actually I thought looked like Petoskey, but I guess there's a lot of similarities between Petoskey and Traverse City. I would have thought that Traverse City would have had more big buildings in the back, because these still look like a little bit smaller buildings. So again, let me know what you think. Is this Traverse City or not? Indian River. This looks more like Afton than Indian River. I thought there'd be some bigger boats versus just people canoeing. I think they got the individual right. I know some people that live in Indian River. In fact, when I'm over in Indian River, sometimes this is how I dress. So I think they got the person right. I don't know if they got the environment right. Although there are parts of, the sturgeon, the pigeon that kind of do look like this. Mackinac City, I thought they got this one the most right. You got the bridge in the background. If you look on the right over there above his left shoulder, those are some older pictures of what Mackinac City used to look like. There's some boats. I think there should have been a ferry in here. And then also I think they got the shirt especially right, because when you go to Mackinac City, you're going to buy t-shirts with Mackinac. Gaylord. I think they got Gaylord partly right. I wish they would have added some Alpine Village to this, but they added a lot of snow, which you can see there's probably 5 feet of snow in the background in this picture. So I think that by itself is uh, pretty accurate. Number 8, Elk Rapids. I think this one's good. I think I've seen people in Elk Rapids dressed like this. Got a little coffee, water, cute downtown. I think they got Elk Rapids right. Again, as you're watching this, let me know what you think. Did they get any of these right? Did they get a couple of these right? Which ones did you think they were the most spot on? This one is Wolverine. Wolverine's a little town located between Indian River and Gaylord, and it's just sort of a rural area. Now, it's got a cute downtown with some great restaurants. I think this one was accurate. This is, the truck in the background should probably be a little bit newer, but other than that, I think they were close. Harbor Springs. This is, I think they got this one right. There's actually a part of downtown Harbor Springs with a dock that looks just like this. Obviously, this is a rendering and something ChatGPT created, but this isn't too far off. Number 11, Sheboygan. Sheboygan does have a little bit of a railway through here. What does his hat say? I can't tell what his hat says, but another one that I think is pretty close. Mackinac Island. This was a fun one. I think this was Mackinac Island like 50 years ago. What do you think? I don't think this is what Mackinac Island looks like today. I'm over there enough. The horse-drawn carriages are probably right. It's usually so hot over there in the summertime that people don't generally dress like this. So other than that, they got the horses right. That is a house. You see houses like that on Mackinac Island. They got the architectural right on that one. And that is it. As you're watching this live or the recording, if you have any questions, how do you think ChatGPT did? Do you think ChatGPT knows about Northern Michigan, or does it not know about Northern Michigan? Is my job safe for a little bit longer because I still have more information than artificial intelligence does? Again, thank you for watching. This summer, we're getting ready to do the halfway replay. That's going to come up not next week, but the week after. We're going to have Ian Ashton from One Trust Home Loans back on here to talk about what's going on in the mortgage market or what's going on with mortgage rates, because that's sort of a little bit of a contention right now where it seems like buyers, there's still a lot of demand out there. There's a ton of inventory that just came on the market this week as we get closer to the 4th. I think the second half of this year, there are going to be some deals to be had if you're a buyer. So if you've been looking, start paying a little bit closer attention because those deals are out there. And I'll tell you, the deals we've got for our buyers in the first half of this year have definitely been better than they have been in a long time. And look, sellers are still doing well. They might not be doing as well as when interest rates were 3%, but they're still doing, historically well. There's still a lot of houses that have a ton of equity in Northern Michigan. So as always, if you're buying or selling in Northern Michigan, if you have any questions, if you're just paying attention to the market, just want to have a conversation about what's going on, please reach out to me. And I'd be happy to talk to you. Again, as always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next week.